This is the miniFCU, a compact and realistic device which aims to elevate your flight simulation experience. miniCOCKPIT has worked hard to bring this new product to us flight simmers, and in this video we'll have a look at it and its features while I share my opinion on it. So this is the box you get with the miniFCU. As you can see on the side, this is the first of several products miniCOCKPIT plans to launch, which will all extend onto the miniFCU. Which, by the way, if you want a video where I explain a little more about what the miniFCU is and what it's used for, feel free to check out a previous video of mine, which I linked in the description, where I share my initial thoughts on the product before I received it. Anyway, once you've opened the box, you'll find just two parts, the miniFCU and a cable. I love that it's only a single cable for the entire device, however the cable they provide is rather short. Thankfully, it works for my setup, but if you need a longer cable, it is a very common cable, as it's just a USB Type-A to micro USB. When it comes to the setup, all you need to do is visit a page on their website where they provide a setup guide as well as the software needed for the setup depending on your flight simulator. It should be a quick and easy install so you can get flying with it right away. For those wondering which flight simulators it works with, it's designed for X-Plane 11, X-Plane 12, and Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and works with airplanes from TOLUS, Flight Factor, Fly-by-Wire, Headwind, Jar Design, and Phoenix, as well as the default airplanes in X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Of course, depending on when you're watching this video, there may be new developers or flight simulators which it works with too. Now that it's all set up, let's talk about the build quality and its functionality. When it comes to build quality, it's really great. It feels sturdy and well put together, and while I haven't used a real FCU before, all the buttons and switches feel very satisfying, and I'd imagine they're quite accurate to the real airplane, as they've spent lots of time working on the details. Speaking of details, they've readjusted the paint on this 6 times to get the most accurate replica as possible. On top of that, they claim the formatting and fonts are 100% accurate, and a really cool detail to notice with that is how the number 8 is not symmetrical on the LCD display. So now that we're done looking at the outside of the miniFCU, let's see what it can actually do inside a flight simulator. As previously mentioned, it works on a variety of airplanes and flight simulators, but I'm going to be using the TOLUS Airbus A319 inside of X-Plane 12 for this demonstration. I just got an airplane in the air, I have no flight plan set or anything, I'm just sitting at 6,000 feet, 240 knots, flying a heading of 056. So essentially this is just the autopilot panel of the airplane, and you can change lots of different things in the airplane like the speed, the heading, and the altitude, as well as the vertical speed, and engage and disengage autopilots, as well as a few other things. Firstly, we're going to look at the speed function over here. If we increase the speed dial, you can see it changes inside the flight simulator as well. The same principle applies if I reduce the speed with the mouse. It will change on the miniFCU too, but I don't understand why anyone would buy the miniFCU just to use their mouse anyway. But it's good to know that if you instinctively use your mouse for something, they will still remain in sync. The other button that you can see next to the speed dial is the Speed Mac button, which as you press it, switches the representation of the speed to the speed in reference to the speed of sound. On the right side of the speed dial, we have the heading selector. We're currently flying heading 56, but we can change that to go to heading 100 if we so choose, and you can already see that the airplane is banking to do just that. Now in between the heading selector and the altitude selector, we have some other buttons here. We have the autopilot engage and disengage button as well for autopilot 1 and autopilot 2 over here, so we can actually switch to autopilot 2 if we want to do so and go back to 1. Also disconnect from the autopilot and also re-engage it over here. Just like inside the real airplane, and also as the TOLUS shows, the lights turn on and off accordingly, which is very nice. You also have a auto throttle disengage and engage button over here, as well as this button in the middle, which basically changes the way your flight directors look and represents them in a slightly different way. I can demonstrate that to you real quick right here by pressing the button, and you can see now we have track instead of heading selector, and we have this flight path vector, I believe it is. Now let's move on to the altitude selector, where you can change the target altitude, let's say up to 7,000. We can also change the increments to go from 100 to 1,000s, which, as you would imagine, makes us go up 1,000 or down 1,000 with each rotation. We put it back to 100, as you would imagine, it goes back to 100. We also have a metric altitude button, which allows us to see the altitude in meters on the primary flight display. And lastly, we have the vertical speed selector, so let's say we want to go up to 7,000 feet, we can choose our vertical speed by pulling it and selecting a vertical speed, such as 500 feet per minute, so we should reach there in 2 minutes. So as I showed you with the vertical speed selector, you can pull and push the knobs, and that works for everything else as well. For example, with the heading selector, if you push it, you are giving the authority to the airplane. So essentially you're going into LNAV when you push the heading selector, and when you pull it, you are going into a heading select mode. It's slightly different from Boeing airplanes, which is what I'm more used to, which, by the way, I apologize if the explanations are not the best for this, as I'm not so used to using the FCU, but I'm doing my best to give you an explanation with the knowledge I have about it. You can use the same push and pull principle as well for the speed selector, so if you push it here, it will manage the speed from the FMC, or the MCDU in this case. And if you pull it, you have the speed window again, and you can select your own speed, and then the same principle goes for the altitude as well with VNAV. Lastly, if we look at the bottom, we have some more buttons. Let's talk about the Expedite one first, as it's interesting since it's customizable. You can choose the Expedite button to have several different functions. As you can see here, we have a Flight Director button and an LS button. If you want to use the Expedite button as either of those, you can actually switch it using the plugin, but it might be different depending on the flight simulator you use. In X-Plane, you just go into Plugins, miniCOCKPIT, and you can go ahead and change it over here. So Expedite to FD. I don't know if I have to reset it. Let me try over here already. If I hit Expedite, yep, it turns the flight directors off. If I hit Expedite again, it turns the flight directors back on. I'm going to put it back to Expedite to default, which means that the Expedite button will work as an Expedite button. You also have an approach button over here to enter your approach mode, or just a localizer button if you only have a localizer that you want to capture. So those are basically all the functions you can expect with the miniFCU. If you have any questions about it, you can leave them in the comments below. I hope that you found this video useful and it helped you decide whether you want a miniFCU or not. If you do, I'll leave links to the miniFCU in the description, where you can learn more about it and see how you can get one yourself. The price for the miniFCU should be around $250, which personally I think is a really good deal for what you're getting. If you compare it to many other products that are similar to this, they usually end up being much more expensive, so I think what miniCOCKPIT is doing is very cool, as they're giving you a very high quality product for quite a reasonable price. As usual, you can always leave comments below if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. I hope this video was useful, and if you did find it useful, feel free to leave a like and possibly subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future.